Yeah, that's a big thing too, is, I was talking to my wife before all this and I was just kind of like laying it out. And at this point, she's pretty much used to it. But you talk to people who, if they're not kind of raised around this, it just comes across as incredibly neurotic at times.
For sure. All right, everybody, we're back with another podcast. Coach Rob here, and I have a very, very special guest. You might see the resemblance, maybe not. Maybe because he has a handsome mustache and I'm still rocking the full beard. But my special guest is Tyler Goodwin, and it's not a coincidence. Yes, he's my son, and I couldn't be more excited and proud to have him here. How's it going, kiddo?
It's going good. I'm glad we finally made this happen. We've talked about it for, I think, years off and on about some sort of a podcast, but we never quite knew how it would happen. So I think this is probably the best time it could have, though, for sure.
Yeah, it's the best time, the most relevant time, and really for both of us, because, I was off from competitive bodybuilding, which is what kind of built this channel. And then there was like 3 years of dumb shit, and then got back into it, as everybody knows, about eight or 9 months ago, and went through a prep, and now I'm back into it 100%. And that's where we're going to stay. And the channel, I'm proud to say, as you've noticed, is evolved back into a podcast that is solely about bodybuilding. And when we say bodybuilding, we mean both the enthusiast bodybuilder, which means anybody out there who's trying to better themselves through strength training protocols, diet protocols, going through the paces of all the X factors of optimized recovery, supplementation, whatever the case may be. There's nothing off limits. And that's the focus, and that's where we're heading. And it's a perfect time to have my son here because, and I'll let him explain fully and take over the conversation. But
well, that's kind of how this all started, right? When you started competing back in 2015. We were, so you had been doing like endurance sports, and I had done like cross country and track throughout like high school, and had done cycling. We had done like, I think, 100-mile ride together that had like barbecue afterwards. That was one of the first like major athletic endeavors I had. But when I think 2014 you decided to start competing again?
Yeah, well, I started prepping for that show in 2014, competed, after being heavily, and we'll talk about this too, from what you remember, was heavily into the 90s bodybuilding culture, as I've mentioned many times. And then came out of that and tried new endeavors, just trying to be a more well-rounded trainer and coach. Really wish I never would have left, but everybody evolves and goes through the paces. And then we came back, and then in 2014, got back into bodybuilding prep. And I guess, that was an inspiration for you at that time.
That's how it started. So I remember vividly, we were getting Mexican food as a family, and you had it kind of put in your ear to maybe, you could have a shot at this and try at it again. And at that point, I graduated high school in 2011. So that's a few years out of high school. I was working, and I had been coming to the gym, and we would work out, but a lot of it was more like conditioning, circuit training, where we're still using weights and barbells and dumbbells, but it was high intensity in a different way, where you might be doing like, standing military presses with like, a 100-meter row. But even that stuff, while I enjoyed getting in shape, what I really liked was putting on muscle. And I remember once you got into bodybuilding, that opened up what I actually come to enjoy with strength conditioning training, which is like hypertrophy and maximizing muscle growth and the sport of bodybuilding. And I remember we were in that Mexican restaurant, and you were like, hey, I'm going to do this again. And I was like, how do you get big? And you told me, you were like, you pretty much just need to eat chicken, steak, potatoes, and rice until you are sick and tired of it. And while things have evolved quite a bit since then, I can tell you that does work from personal experience. And that's kind of what started it for me. And I got you back into it. So it's kind of a full circle that now that I'm back into it, you decided to start competing again. So we're kind of going out this a second time, if you think about it.
Yeah, because, I took 3.5 years off from competition, really felt like I kind of lost my identity and was searching for something, and then found it again with this most recent prep. And I know I'll never leave it again. And it re-inspired you because you also went through a little bit of a hiatus.
Oh, yeah.
What happened there?
Well, throughout my 20s, I'm 32 now, you know, I had gotten into training and that bodybuilding style hypertrophy training with no aims to compete really, but I really enjoyed the culture. I watched all the Dorian and Ronnie videos, and even throughout my childhood, I had memories of you like Jay Cutler, Phil Heath, and those eras still being something you kept your ear to the ground on and that we were very aware of. But when I had been lifting for about 5 years, from like 2013 till about 2019. I had trained, and there would be some small breaks here and there, but I got to where, you know, I graduated high school at 135 pounds, and within those 5 years, I got up to above 200 at one point. A little bit of a not so great dirty bulk time, but that's what was popular on YouTube when I started, and I'm glad I tried it then, so I don't do that now in my 30s. But I ended up just, you get caught up in work. I had a kid, and I think my passion for training kind of left because I didn't really know what I loved about it anymore. And I knew I loved bodybuilding, but in that kind of training and that culture. But I think I just kind of had to have some time away from it and work to realize that's not how I want to go about things. That's not how I want to live my life. And getting back into the gym and realizing that if you can kind of make that work and build that discipline, it bleeds out into all corners of your life. So I realized that I wasn't my best self not training. I wasn't my best self if I wasn't eating on a routine. And keep in mind, I still, you know, was, if you went to the doctor with me, I had good blood panels. I was healthy relatively. It's just, there was nothing I was really achieving physiologically that was anything impressive. And when you're used to, you know, when you can deadlift over 400 pounds at one point, squat over 400 pounds, I did a 300-pound bench. So no, I can't bench as much as you got. I know that was one question, but one day that'll happen. To go from that to, I can't even hardly, you know, press 135 or even pick up a heavy box without feeling tired. That really, that was a lot to soak in and realize, you know, and then you look at pictures when you never thought you were big enough, and then you realize, oh no, now I've shrank 30 pounds. So getting back into it now, having that break kind of made me realize what I really enjoyed about it and what I love about training, how I like to train, which, you know, I'm sure at some point we'll talk about that, but that was one major thing this time around. When I first got into it, YouTube, Instagram, all of these things were a thing, but you kind of had a few of those starting channels and voices. And it wasn't as complicated in terms of like figuring out a program, but you also didn't have all of the information out there. Back then it was just do 5-3-1 or do like a bro split if you want to get big or get strong, and eat a lot of food. And I had good results, but I just wasn't quite committed to it. Now that's definitely changed. And for you, I think it's kind of the same way, but when you go all in on it, it makes it a whole lot easier to stay committed. I wasn't all in on it. So nutrition, lifestyle being a huge lever now for sure.
Yeah, and it's awesome because now we can get together and, you know, bodybuilding, not only our own personal pursuits, but the industry at large, conversations we can have. So, you know, it couldn't have turned out better. The stars could not have aligned any better for us both coming in and our own personal journeys, but sort of being able to unite like father and son, to have this commonality of something that we both absolutely love and are passionate about. But, and even back when you were, you know, it's funny when you were born in 1993.
Yep.
And in 1993, you know, I was heavily into bodybuilding. At that time, you know, you trained until you threw up, or your eyes, the blood vessels broke in your eyes, which that's a thing that happened.
Yep.
You know, we consumed supplements that tasted like gasoline and sand, but we didn't care. My post-workout meals would literally be 2 blenders full of egregious amounts of some shitty weight gainer with oats and peanut butter and whole milk. Dorian Yates was God, and that was pretty much my life. And then you came into the scene, and so you were around that for a little bit, but
I remember some of it, yeah.
Do you remember any of that?
Yeah, I do remember. It would be back close to around 99. I was about 5 or 6 at the spa, you know, when you were in those kinds of clubs. I remember kind of the late 90s, early 2000s era of bodybuilding. You walk in the gym, every guy is like jacked or wants to be. It's all the plastic pants and jackets too, like scraping against each other. That's all you heard. But that was the culture that I thought of the gym. You thought of like Cybex and hammer strength equipment. You thought of someone training hard. You thought of like not a bunch of political correctness or all these other things that are like baggage sometimes brought to the gym. It was just about going and training and living that lifestyle and seeing guys eating their meals at the front, desk area when they were done. Because if you missed your protein, you were going to lose any progress you had made up to that point if you didn't eat it right then. So no, that was it's funny because in some ways so much has changed, but also so little has changed. Like the things that really work and the things that are kind of part of that culture, I think for a lot of years, people tried to sort of pivot it into, well, it doesn't matter what kind of foods, you don't have to like live out that kind of a 90s or early 2000s mentality of hard work. There's ways you can cheat it. And now we're kind of going back full circle where the people who are successful talk about how they don't make compromises on their diet. They don't make compromises in their lifestyle. And I think that what's funny this time around for me, and I don't know if you feel the same, but I used to, when I first started lifting, you think bodybuilding and that sort of sport is based around like you're a bodybuilder once you get free protein. You're a bodybuilder once you get free clothes and it's easy. And really what I've realized is it feels more pure and like more noble almost that I have to buy everything. I have to look for deals on chicken. And I feel like if you don't have that period of time, you don't really learn all the things that you need to learn, especially these people that train people that have never had to on a budget. Like it'd be really easy for me to tell someone to eat filet mignon 4 times a day with a baked potato and like have a $400 a month budget of supplements. But in reality, not everyone has that ability. And that's where the excuses start coming in. So for me as a dad, as someone who works full time, and has to still have other things than bodybuilding as a priority, I know that if I had to for $50 to $75 a week, I could be putting down quite a bit, about 12 pounds of chicken plus a week. So that I think this time around too is realizing how that's what it's about. It's about that daily grind. Even if you don't compete one day, if you live that lifestyle just to make yourself a better person and the people around you as a result, that's been big for me this time. And I was actually going to ask you, when you came back into it this time around, one thing I noticed is you seem to be more sure of kind of your, not only the nutrition side, but I think just the whole path of bodybuilding in general. And that's kind of how I feel too. What do you think? Do you think like right now versus back in 2015 when you did that first show back, what felt different this time around in these preps? Even though both times you were motivated, how do you think, you being different as a person and kind of those, because that's one thing I noticed and that kept me more motivated during just my own stuff these last few months.
Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things. I mean, the one thing that we all got caught up in over the years, and I think people are onto it a little bit, is the social media age. And really, if you boil down social media, it's people out there trying to make it look like there are quicker fixes and different solutions, and they're very dogmatic, but they're very convincing, and people buy into it. And when I came back this time around, I sort of searched my soul and I said, let's take this back full circle. And some of it was fear, because in my mind, doubt crept in. I love this sport. I want to do this, and genetics is an overwhelming part of it. And I knew I had the genetics, but after being off for 3 years and 56 years old, you start to doubt your abilities and capabilities. So then you start thinking to yourself, what is going to be the most foolproof methodology of me being able to give it my absolute best with nothing falling through the cracks? So for me, going back full circle to more of that 90s mentality. And now we have so much better data. Now that some of these name diets have run their course, we're finding flaws in them. Me as a full-time coach are working with people that are trying some of these shortcuts that work for a time until they don't. So I thought, let me check into what some of the best and the brightest of the industry are doing, combined with what I learned back in a day when there was no 8-pack influencers pushing something. And it's like Justin Harris, who I just interviewed, says nobody gets fat on chicken and rice. If you want to have a phenomenal physique with trying to maximize muscle and not get fat and maximize body composition, you go back to what has worked in the industry since the industry began. Yeah. And that's where I adopted the carb cycling principles. And it was funny because at that same time, there were dozens and dozens of people that I was working with in the trenches in my coaching business that were coming to me saying, hey, this worked for a time. Now I'm having issues with this. I'm having issues with performance. Women were telling me that I lost my cycle, my hair's falling out, my sleep is suffering, my performance is suffering. They would bring their blood work receipts to support their claims, and it was all true. Thyroid tanking, all these things were happening. And then, like I've always done, I've always done pre and post workout carbs, and I've always done refeeds. So when I would apply just that simple approach to some of these clients, in nearly every situation, things improved, which just piled onto the data and made me make the full switch going back to that. What I did in the past worked, but this time, out of fear, I said, I have to do, no matter what I believe would be the absolute most optimized approach, because I'm fighting time, and an IFBB pro, if he took 4 years off, would question if he could still stand up on an Olympia stage.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's an eternity in this sport, because there's a clock that's ticking in this sport. So I feel incredibly fortunate. And then when you go through a 7.5 month prep and you align the data and you see anecdotally what works, and then you come into a show that you were hoping you could just be worthy of stepping on stage. Well, with me, not only was I worthy, but I was the best I've ever been. I don't think anybody would argue that.
No, it wasn't even comparable.
It wasn't even comparable. And so now nobody out there is going to convince me that what I'm doing now and what I'm advocating for many who are putting their faith in me as a coach would disagree with that. But you still get the my way or the highway dogmatic internet. And now I'm found myself in a gutter war with these people, which is ridiculous. It's like I said in a previous video, imagine grown adults yelling at you on the internet for what you choose to put in your mouth, and you're getting better results.
Oh, it's especially things that 15, 20 years ago, it wouldn't have been even fringe to suggest eating like carbs to gain muscle, for example. That's what's funny is that when you take some time off and come back when I was lifting, before I took a break, what was funny is in that whole culture, it wasn't denying at that time if carbs were okay or not. It was just if the carbs from a Pop-Tart versus rice were the same, which in hindsight, it's funny that ever was a discussion, but not that you can't have these things like cereal or a Pop-Tart like Tyler does, even though he hates them, which I think is hilarious. But I've never met someone that loathes eating a Pop-Tart while they do it. But
that's why I have Cocoa Pebbles, because it's delicious.
Yeah, that is cereals. And that is also one of the first memories of us eating cereal together.
Cereal is a genetic trait. I'm a cereal nerd. Yeah. He loves cereal, so it was passed down. Yeah,
if you told me to eat a whole box of Cocoa Pebbles, I could legitimately mixing bowl half a gallon of milk
all day.
It would be not a problem. I mean, getting 1,000 grams of carbs, if it was on Fruity Pebbles or Cocoa Pebbles, would be something by lunchtime I could have accomplished. But
which I'm glad I don't do that, because then I wear in my tire of Cocoa Pebbles.
Yeah,
and so that's why I know if I have a brutal leg day, and it's also my high day, and I know that absorbing 60 grams of carbohydrate from Cocoa Pebbles, which is going to be immediately absorbed into the muscle, pose no health threat to me whatsoever, is something that I can look forward to.
Yeah.
So it's a good situation. So
and that's what's funny. It's really only because you're on PEDs that you can do that.
Yeah, that's the only reason.
It's because you're taking grams and grams and grams and
unbelievable amounts of steroids. Yeah. I literally have 5 or 6 syringes sticking out of different body parts at any given moment.
We have to cut here in a minute, actually.
Yeah, I've got to go dose up. Yeah. I mean, I like the pivot to that, because when you want to talk about differences between the 90s and today, in the 90s, you didn't talk about it.
Oh yeah, no.
You did not.
Even when I first started, it was the Natty or Nots had first started on YouTube. Like that was right when Greg Doucette and all those guys started doing like, this guy is scamming you. And of course, like when you're younger, you're like, why does this guy look like that versus no one else does? But you know, and as someone who can speak from experience now, it's not this magical lever. I mean, to a point it can be, but nothing you'll retain. It'll be carried by a drug, and so then you're going to only look that way on it. So I think that now with it being so open, it's actually led to, in my personal experience coming back into it, you go on a forum back in 2015, I remember just asking, hey, you know, what should you start with? And it was anything less than, you know, half a gram a week doesn't even count. And so then that's why you have all these problems. And then now that we have a lot more education and it's more just out in the open, the stigma in bodybuilding and in like physique sport, I think has pretty much changed to where and evolved where most people now accept that if you're going for a pro card or if you want to compete in the NPC, it's part of it. I think the general population is more accustomed to it just because they see it so much in their gyms now, but it's always been there. I mean, in pretty high amounts. You just wouldn't know because you think it's this magic pill.
Right.
But you could have guys at, I mean, the local gym I work at on 3 compounds and you don't even look like you're on food. So it's like, you know, I definitely think it's interesting. I mean, I had my blood panels done. I talked about this the other day when we had someone in the group post about that, about how, you know, insulin and constantly spiking and needing carbohydrate. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. You're killing your metabolism, all these things we hear. But I got a blood panel done when I was natural. And what's interesting is a day after a 500 grams of carbs, I had been doing that for over 12 weeks straight, with most of my days being around 400 to 500 grams of carbs. But I'm eating just chicken, rice, lean beef and rice, these sorts of things. My fasting blood sugar was my glucose was in the 80s. My systemic inflammation was at the very bottom of the measurably like good range. So like, where's all of these issues? My metabolism is perfectly regulated. My cholesterol is in the best range it's ever been. And it's most of my calories come from jasmine rice. Yeah. So, and then, you know, chicken breast and lean ground beef. So I do think it's funny that you can tell me that. And if that even happens for you, I would be suspicious that that's all you eat. But let's say it was for sake of it, because everyone is different. I'm not seeking to like argue with you on that. What I think is interesting is like, I don't even think about someone that decides to do it on a different. If you ask me, I'm going to say eat carbohydrate. If you want to gain muscle, it's going to be beneficial. Yeah. We've seen that. But I do think it's funny that, you know, you'll go into a sport where that's been how it's been done since, I mean, at least the 90s, even when they didn't have as good of an idea around nutrition. You don't think people might have at one point tried to cut them out and get bigger or gain muscle? Like this is the first time it's ever been thought of. I think it's kind of...
I've said forever, if you want to know how to put on as much muscle as possible and keep your body fat levels as low as possible simultaneously, achieve amazing body composition, look jacked, peeled, shredded, amazing, ask a bodybuilder. Yeah. These are the most in the trenches, have tried everything. If there were anything out there, any deviation from that gained them an advantage, they would be doing it. Yeah. But if you took every bodybuilder in every division who has an IFBB pro card, I'm not saying Mr. Olympia, I'm saying all of them, the thousands out there. Yeah. 99% are still doing some version of carb cycling with prioritizing their protein, keeping their fat low, but just enough for good hormonal ranges. They train super hard, progressive overload. They go through their preps in phases. They go through a gain phase. They realize that cutting for too long, being in a deficit for too long brings diminishing returns. You end up looking worse. Everything has to be calculated. And that's been the system since the 1960s to some degree. Yeah. And the only thing that's really changed is some of the PEDs. But back to your point, you know, we can go any day of the week to some local gym and find these bros out there that are injecting copious amounts of God knows what. A lot. And look like total dog shit. Yep. Because they're not eating right. And it's like, We have always said, the top coaches have said, Justin just said in my interview, the biggest lever you can pull is the diet.
And that's been the biggest thing for me this time around. I mean, even before I was like a Monday through Friday. It's like all of my meals, but it's I'm in my 20s. I'll go out and have some beers, or I'll, have like a weekend of not tracking my food. Mm-hmm. And that's enough if you want to lift and look like most people at your gym, frankly. I mean, there's a lot of people that can adhere to that, and you might wonder what damage you can do in 2 days. And I would say you can completely offset the first 5 you have if you're binge drinking every weekend, not getting sleep. Those are the things that you change. You can do all of the PEDs you want, and you're going to fast track yourself into a bad place, because that is more stress on your body along with these things. Even at smaller doses, you're not going to reap the benefits of it.
Well, what are a lot of the big up and coming coaches now that are really overtaking the scene? When you listen to these interviews, they go out of their way to tell you, hey, we're not just tracking lean mass gains, body composition, bringing them in properly. We're also concerned about health. Mm-hmm. And that's become a big part of it. And we've got so much data coming in now about being able to utilize carbohydrate and not instantly be a freaking diabetic, about how people have even, lowered their resting blood sugar with the ingestion of carbohydrate. We know now that with performance enhancing drugs, number one, with PEDs, back to the original point, it's called a performance enhancing drug. You have to first have some performance to enhance.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't focus on the performance. What is the performance? Training and diet and recovery.
Yeah.
They just inject a bunch of shit that they got in a back alley in reckless abandon. And now intelligent coaches, intelligent bodybuilders, whether it be recreational or competitive, we now understand that you find the point that the minimum effective dose works, because once you go beyond that, then you have a curve that enters into diminishing returns, because now you're entering into the side effect realm,
yes,
becoming more dominant than the benefit realm.
Yep.
And there's such a critical balance to that. I take the Chris Bumstead approach. Everybody knows who that is.
Yeah.
And I think he was pretty good. If he keeps working harder, he might go far.
Yeah, he might go somewhere with it.
And I could even, this is another podcast, but I could even argue he may be the best that's ever been in the sport. And I have my reasons for that. But
you could make a good point.
His stance has been, obviously I do them, but I don't tell people exactly what, because number one, a lot of his audience are guys in their teens and 20s.
Yep.
And number two, and I've experienced this, I find the minimum effective dose. And when I tell people who ask me what I do, if I tell them how much, the first thing they say to me is that I'm lying.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand. And I'm like, no, you do, like we said, number one, you have to have the performance to enhance, diet, training, recovery, all the things.
What was that?
The Alexa's talking to us now.
It's going to chime in on
She's
the
going to chime in and tell us we're wrong.
Actually,
but the other thing is that I think we definitely need to touch on the role of genetics.
Yeah, and that's something that we've talked some off this. And I feel like in some ways people don't credit genetics enough, but also people use it as an excuse. So in one way, Phil Heath, if you look at him when he played college basketball, he looked better than any guy that's currently at my gym. This is doing basketball workouts. Yeah. And that's not an exaggeration. He was 180 at his height with
and just
biceps.
A freak.
Yeah, I mean, he's a freak. I mean, he could probably look at a dumbbell.
Ronnie was a freak.
Yeah.
Flex Wheeler was a freak. Even if you look at the old pictures of Dorian when he was a teenager,
yeah,
he was little, but he was super lean, had serratus that were poking out, had muscle fullness back when he was a punk rock kid, gang banging in Birmingham.
Yep.
And we've talked about this too. It's a difficult conversation to have with peers and clients and people that ask you, because unfortunately you can look at an individual and say, and determine, maybe keeping it to yourself, this guy could train harder than he's ever trained, diet harder than he's ever dieted, and take every freaking PED on the planet. he's never going to have that physique.
Yeah, you could look really amazing. You could look better than almost anyone.
And he'd be happy with it.
Yeah, but you're not going to be in that percentage of people where, even when these guys, before they were the best, before they lifted a weight, some of them had traps already when they were, or they had biceps, or they naturally had abs, like just existing. And I feel like, the credit you got to give that too is when it comes to PEDs and the food, like genetically, if you're someone that, I don't have a problem eating 500 grams of carbs, even naturally, and affecting my blood glucose or anything in any way negatively. For a long term, sure. But some people, and you've probably seen this, where for whatever reason, it could be compounded over years, it could be their genetics, it could be a lot of different factors, they don't respond exactly the same. Or you have to be more mindful of, okay, well, we're going to up their carbs, but it's going to be what would be probably a lower day for me just because of how they seem to respond to it. Yeah. Because everyone's individual. And
you have to nuance it with the individual.
But I think that genetics, as it relates to PEDs and these people that are the best, you can only make yourself so wide if your frame is narrow. You can only add so much fullness if you just, like, some people just look flatter with their muscles and the way their muscle insertions, the insertion points.
It's my journey. Number one, this really only applies if you want to step on stage.
Yeah.
That's it.
You probably wouldn't notice it on most people until they go on a stage, because on picture by yourself,
now you're being judged by structure and muscle insertions and peaks and all these things that genetic plays a great role. How did I really get started and get excited about bodybuilding? When it's a fun story, and I want to have your mother on here one day. People have asked for her over and over again. But, the funny story is, kids, all gather around the fire. Me and his mother split up for a while. I was depressed out of my mind, going through a bad point in my life. And I met a competitive bodybuilder in the shithole dead-end job that I was in. I wasn't training. I wasn't big. I was probably 165 pounds. And he took me to the gym, beat the ever-loving shit out of me for several days. I actually enjoyed that. Maybe I was trying to beat myself up because I was depressed and it made me feel better to punish myself. But what happened along the way was not generally expected, and it often isn't, is after a very short period of time, I grew muscle very quickly. Yeah. And I went from 165 pounds to 200 pounds in less than a year.
Yeah.
And then what happens next? People start coming up to you in the gym saying, "Oh my God, what have you done? You look incredible, da, da, da." And then, a year after that, when you and your brother were babies, I was 230 pounds, didn't know what a freaking steroid was. And why? Because I'm a hyper responder. When I looked at weights, I grew very, very fast. I realized I had longer muscle insertions, and I have always had big, wide shoulders, and my legs grew quickly. I had the aesthetic genetics that would appeal to the bodybuilding competition platform. It's just like, there's probably the greatest Tour de France cyclist who would ever live is probably a plumber somewhere.
Yeah.
Because he just never got on a bicycle. Yeah. He just doesn't know. And somewhere there's a 10-time Mr. Olympia probably selling insurance.
The next Ronnie Coleman
is probably selling insurance somewhere because he never made his way to a gym.
Yeah.
And all of these top pros, Jay Cutler said it, they said when Chris Aceto discovered Jay Cutler was a freaking teenager, and he walked to him and said, literally, you could be a Mr. Olympia. And because he saw the genetic gifts that this guy had. Now, that's not to say if you're watching this, you throw away all hope. Now, if your goal is to get a pro card and be a competitive bodybuilder earning a living at that, or even if it's not your living, be a guy who's in the running to turn pro and go to a national level, genetics are going to play a huge role in that. But you can still, the way the sport has evolved with all of these different divisions, you could go do a men's physique regional show. Yep. You could, you might even be able to go, and we're going to talk about this in a second. This is a big part. You could go do a classic physique show in a regional show. And that's almost like a gateway to progressing through the ranks.
You don't have to worry about being 230 pounds shredded overnight. But if you can get to 180 and on a classic stage, you can grow into that. And I think that's one thing we're seeing now that I like is people that started in classic all these years ago, they can kind of grow into it. And based on what you were talking about, I think you were talking about the 90s though and getting into it. Where are we going with that?
Where were we going with that?
No.
Well, I think once we got to the role of genetics.
Yeah. So genetics. So you could have someone with the structure that if classic didn't exist in today's time, because I remember during Phil Heath's time back when you didn't have, and Jay Cutler, you didn't have a classic division, and then
it was either get a pro card and compete at the Olympia level, at the high pro level, the Tampa Pro, the Pittsburgh Pro, the Arnold. That was all there was. That's why there was only like 6 pro cards given out each year, because that's all you had.
And I think that also, just the health perspective of it didn't make you feel like you could take time, because it's like, oh, well, you just got to wait 10 years and you can look like that, and then you can compete on an Olympia stage. And that's not as appealing to some people, especially now where everything is very instant gratification. But with genetics, I think that classic, wish they'd call it classic bodybuilding, because I always get the physique part mixed up. But with classic, what I enjoy about that is it lets people go in and focus on putting on muscle. Mm-hmm. But if you have good shape in that, you can be like Terrence Ruffin, who I think was 180 pounds on stage.
Yeah, he still has several pounds available to him to make weight.
But he's standing next to a guy that was 210 or 200, and he's competitive with him. He's he's the top 3 best in the world. So I do think genetics. One thing that I want to touch on before we move into the next part, though, is that with genetics, I do think that most people, because you'll see this in a lot of groups too, where the caveat before they talk about their progress or their physique is, okay, well, first though, just to let you know, I hold water down genetically. I hold water down here, and also genetically, like I can't really grow big arms, and also genetically speaking, there is an extent that is fair. If you're leaving it on the table at the gym, if you are really dialed in with your food. Sure, someone that has the flexibility or genetics that does the same thing or not work as hard as you, he's going to achieve more. However, most people, to reach what they probably picture as their ideal look and physique and picture of health and strength, you don't have to be Phil Heath. No. You don't have to. And like we said, you could be someone that if someone posted a picture of you or you went to the beach in isolation, they would ask if you've been to the Mr. Olympia. I mean, because
they don't understand.
So that's where one thing that, genetics it's great if you're 5'8" and you can put on all this mass that someone else would have to put on that's over 6 feet into a smaller frame with great insertions. But a lot of guys, it's not their genetics holding them back, because I'm sure you see this even with your clients. It's their lifestyle. They won't commit to doing the daily. Because
most people aren't trying to go win a pro card.
No.
And the other thing about it is the Masters division. It's one of the fastest growing divisions now for regional shows. And I think that's because somebody's over 40, over 50, they've built a business, they've raised their kids. They're not they have no preconceived notions of being some pro bodybuilder, but they know that they can dedicate themselves to something that only a tiny percent of the population does. They can do the hardest work they've ever done. They can show that work off at a regional show in their local town. And whether they placed 2nd or 9th doesn't really matter, because what they've achieved through the process is something that they can carry with them for the rest of their lives, tell their grandkids about, walk around with pride. Yep. So that's another great reason, to say, don't let your genetics stop you. Live your dream, but just understand there are certain limitations to reach the highest levels of the sport. Be honest with
yourself.
Yeah, be honest with yourself.
If you're not putting all of that time in, you can't expect magically for results to happen, but expect to get what you put into it. And then your mileage may vary. That if you're a genetically, I know people that, even though I could always remain very lean and not gain weight very easy as long as I'm active, I didn't naturally have a 6-pack. Some other guys did, but they also couldn't put on muscle as quick as I could. Yeah. So we all have different things, but I do think that those divisions, kind of what we're going to next, classic, that's what I think this time around has been big for me, is that being a thing. Chris Bumstead kind of cementing it the last 6-7 years as you can make just as much of a career or a name for yourself, and get just as much validation being the best at that, or the best you can be at that.
And then back to social media. I mean, that's what a lot of these teens and 20-year-olds, that's the look they're looking for anyway. That's why it's so appealing to that segment of the population.
Yeah. And, for me, going into this and getting back into training and bodybuilding specifically, the biggest thing that I wanted to make sure of is that if I do, if I'm going to put in the work eating the food, I eat the same thing every day, just varying the volume of certain things depending on if it's a high or low carb day or whatever. I spend most of my time either eating food or cooking food. If I'm doing all of that, then I need to compete. And, just for me personally, I don't see a point in doing something if I can't win at it or like be competitive at it. And that's what drives me. So classic is something that, getting back into it, knowing I can compete and not be pressured about putting on 50 pounds of muscle. But if I can put on 20 to 25 and be as absolutely shredded as possible, then I have to probably bet that not as many people are going to at least work as hard as I will. And you can win a show in classic with that. It's not grind.
For sure.
Or feeling like you got to push. One thing about the PEDs in those divisions that some guys feel like they have time against them and they got to really push for a bit to get to a competitive weight. And you got to be honest with yourself in this. And that's what you told me. You're like, hey, if you're looking to compete in the NPC, regardless of division, you're going to have to put on some size. But when we talked about it maybe being a 200 something pound weight cap versus having to just be 230 on stage, or 215 or 200 just to even be somewhat competitive in a top 10, it made it a lot more palatable.
And having the height and weight limitations helps. I mean, this last time I stood on stage, the lightest stage weight I've ever been.
Yeah.
And looked considerably better because leanness gives you the illusion of size.
Yep.
And then when we were talking about you competing next year, of course everybody's questioning, should I, whatever. And I'm like, back to genetics.
Yeah.
You've got the genetics. You've got the wider shoulders. You put on muscle easy like I did.
Yeah.
And for you, I don't think getting the amount of tissue that you need is going to be an issue. The issue is getting absolutely peeled, and that's more work ethic than it is genetics, because I think once you peel that down to 4% body fat, you're going to look amazing. And then you have something to build on, and then you go into your rebound and your off season and each year, and you're young enough to where you can make outrageous strides, a couple of times a year and just progress into something that's going to be super, super impressive.
Yeah, gaining muscle, that was the biggest thing the first time around, and this time that it just is a reminder that, you're kind of throwing away, even if it's potential just to locally do very well, and just for myself to know I can, to have that experience being on stage. When I graduated high school, I was 135 pounds. Within a year, I was 185, and with an athletic midsection, I looked very fit. And over 200 pounds when I was natural, that was, we'll admit that was not the best I've ever looked.
Soft.
I was pretty strong but even then not for my weight, considering I was about 20 pounds heavier. But, now I started back into this, and I posted in the group, I think 6 or 7 weeks ago. I started about 150, 155, just pretty low body fat, didn't look like I lifted weights anymore. And I got back into the, mid 170s pretty quickly without any PEDs or anything, just eating tons of food and making sure my training and everything was just regimented and consistent. Even if I had a day where something messed up, I still worked out. If it wasn't the best workout of my life, I kept going. If for some reason it was like, oh my gosh, I screwed up and I didn't have enough rice today and I thought I did, well, I have some on the go for just in case if I mess up. You're always prepared. And so now I feel like coming back into this, the biggest trigger for me this time around has been that consistency, having it be a 7 days a week, 24/7 thing, not just a 3 to 5. And then, some bit of PEDs, which, just testosterone right now. But even that, what's great is, like you said, you can start out such a lower amount and it can take you so far. You can have such crazy results just by doing everything else correctly, which no one else wants to. And that's why I've had a couple people I've talked to that acquaintances, friends, they ask about, hey, do you know someone where I can like, and it's like, hey man, let's talk about like all the other stuff where it's like in the group when someone's like, hey, my wrist hurts. And I'm like, hey, you need to order $300 worth of BPC and take that every day. Hey, before you do that, if you don't have a scale and you're not weighing all your food, if you're not planning everything out and packing it in a lunchbox or cooler, I don't have a 4-star kitchen at my work. I have a microwave. I don't even have a fridge. I put it in an igloo. Like, if you're not prepared to go through all these lengths, then you probably don't have the discipline to take a steroid, no matter if you think you do or not. And, for me, I've realized how insignificant that is actually when all the other stuff takes up most of your time. That's a very small part of my ritual. So I think this time around, after being 7 weeks in that part of my journey, you're right. It's putting on the size. If you have the genetics, I'm growing every day and I can see it. But when you kind of see where even people on a pro level, there's levels even once you get there. Like, you're talking about getting your pro card, and it's like, people think you've made it at that point, but you can have a pro card, and then after that, you could be 15th at every pro show. There's different levels of being a pro. So
well, if I got my pro card, I've said this, I might do one pro show just for the experience. And if I placed 9th, I'd be like, cool, I did it. I'm here. I'm 57 years old. I'm good. I achieved the level that I wanted to achieve. That, how many guys in their 50s turn pro in bodybuilding? Very few.
No, yeah.
And I would be super happy with that.
No, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. There's levels to it, right? So like if it's not even going pro, that's fine, because even once you go pro, there's levels to doing that. You can make a full career out of it, or you can just have that be something that you're like, yeah, I got a pro card and that's it. And that both are noble things. But I think with genetics, for me, starting this time around back at this age, I realized, man, I have a lot of potential in this if I really try hard. I do think I have what it takes, but that's what's funny is you don't really know till you do it.
Yeah.
And people that I'm sure thought that they could eat a certain way for a 12-week prep, they were very surprised. But, for me, I think that now that our circle here, we have a lot more bodybuilding here, having Tyler being part of the team, and he's been very valuable too.
Sure.
I know for you, and he's given me little nuggets of things here and there that, in training with him some has been a huge help for me. But I guess what I was going to ask you is, when you have someone in like my position, when they have limited time, so let's say they have like a timeline where they want to get on stage pretty quick, right? And so obviously you have to have everything perfect. PEDs are going to be part of the discussion, but when it comes to carb cycling, I know you drastically up my carbs a couple days. I have less low days now. Was that kind of the thought process? Like, hey, we need to pack on the size and just kind of have a little bit of
Number one, you can clearly tolerate it.
Yeah.
Because I always start conservatively and assess. There's no blanket formula. That's the thing with the named diet culture. Do this. Like I remember with keto, it's 70% fat and 30 carbs for everyone.
Yeah.
And then, for other, dogmatic culty diet cultures, it's no, just do this. And that's all you have to do. Well, no, it's going to be nuanced for every single individual. So I'm currently working on basically a carb cycling 101 video, just because that's the number one question I'm getting right now. The comments and the questions in the Facebook group says, hey, walk me through this. Well, I'm going to walk people through it. But I'm going to say, here is a basic baseline with the absolute understanding that you'd better be able to nuance this as you work through it in real time and make adjustments. Why do people hire coaches? Because somebody out there is going to apply the basic formula. Yeah. And then if they have someone like myself or another coach, or maybe even yourself, that can say, okay, based on the feedback I'm getting over the last 4 weeks and looking at your check-in photos, looking at the check-in data that you're giving me, asking you very specific questions, I can see that I can feed this individual more and they're going to get more benefit from it, because clearly you got to put on as much size as possible.
Yeah.
And we have a nice long runway right now.
Yeah.
I mean, think about what I did. 4 years off, I got 7 months. I got 7 months to recomp the muscle and chisel it down. Boom, 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 7 months. Yeah. Now coming off of this last prep, Why am I sitting here at 217 pounds still with abs? I built the physique back in 2025, survived it, did enough to win my class. Now I've got a proper runway of time to take an already conditioned physique, enhance it a little bit, bring up some lagging body parts, nuance it a little bit, still knowing that I have plenty of time before I reach that 16-week mark, where then I start to titrate back in the other direction and basically repeat what I did last time. Now with the intel of knowing that I could take in even more carbs and probably have a fuller, better physique still at the same low level of body fat. So we started you out conservatively. You're growing. You're not getting fat. You've got youth on your side. So now I'm like, okay, now it's time to titrate this up. We're going to assess that over the next 4 weeks. Then we'll make adjustments then again, if necessary. It could be even more.
Yeah.
You know, when I was talking to Justin Harris off air, like after we were done recording, he was telling me, you know, most of the information he was giving me was geared more towards the err on the side of more than less and build the metabolism, do the training properly, do the recovery properly, do everything properly. And it's shocking what you can achieve by feeding the body, especially if your genetics are somewhat on point or if you're insulin sensitive enough.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked that is because one thing that I think is funny too this time around for me is the scale. It's something I use to help. But what's funny is I had told you very little about body weight before you made a lot of those changes. I'd sent you a couple pictures within a few weeks of each other. You're like, hey, let me kind of rework some things. And the scale would tell me actually I've lost weight.
Yeah.
Like, but what I'm leaning out, I'm recomping at the same time. And I think it's funny because if I had gone just by weight, gone just by how much things had gone up or down, someone might have thought either, oh, you're on track, or oh, you're losing muscle, you're not gaining muscle. But clearly I am, because I can look in the mirror at a picture and we can compare.
Yeah, I mean, I bumped mine up. I mean, you know, sitting here at 216, 217, on my medium day, I'm taking in 390 grams of carbs. And I've got a super high day that's on my quad day. That's 500 grams, you know, and I'm doing 450 on my back day. I'm doing another 450 on my hamstring day, another 450 on my shoulders and triceps day. And on my low days, it's 300 grams.
Yeah.
I mean, it's high. And what I'm seeing now is so reinforcing because I'm putting on a lot of good weight. I'm recomping more tissue at my advanced age and still have visible abs, veins. And it's not because I'm injecting a little testosterone, which is the only thing I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Just barely above TRT dose. And I went from a stage weight of 191 sitting here now at 217 on slightly above a TRT dose.
Yeah. Food does work. Yeah.
It's food.
Food works.
And it's not shit.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I do have the grace right now of the timeline that I'm in that if we want to go get a night of barbecue once a week, or if we want to, or if your sister, the baker, bakes me something, a brownie, I can have one. And we both know that, what would be the best time to have the damn brownie? At the end of the high day.
Yeah.
So we're always equating everything back into bodybuilding and prep.
Yep.
And so there's an intelligent decision to be made with everything that we do. You know, I wouldn't sit on the couch and pound brownies on my off day / low day. You know?
Yeah,
so,
well, I think everything you need to somewhat have a reason for it. And you can be honest and say, like, I'm going to test this out right now. We're going to see if this is effective. But for the most part, if you're changing something and you don't know why and everything else is on track, then why would you change it? And the thing with bodybuilding that I think is so funny and following all these things, because it really isn't complicated. Like at the end of the day, it's how can you simplify everything as much as possible? There's like 5 different kinds of foods I eat. My week is easy buying the food. If I'm eating the same thing these days, it's the same list every week. It's the same preparation 2 times a week. To me, it almost makes it so that you foolproof your schedule into not failing at your goals with at least bodybuilding.
Yeah.
But even, and this is what's funny, is one of the questions a lot of people asked is, growing up in like a house with a dad who was a trainer and like was in that world, what was that like, and how did that instill with you? And for me, that it really shows that I can teach my 7-year-old son the same thing, that if he sees me being regimented and he knows somewhat, because he asks, I mean, he's curious and he like follows the Olympia. He'll watch it with me, or the Arnold every year, just because he thinks it's like, oh, they're so big. That's so cool. But he understands like, oh, he eats chicken because it has protein that gives you muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, when I go to school, he was saying my school lunch had this and this today. We pack his lunch most days once a week so that he can kind of, with the other kids, eat lunch with them. I say, you can have school lunch if you...
It's his high day.
Yeah, it's his high day. Try not to be a Scrooge, but he'll normally be like, Dad, like I was in the line, they had this and this, and I thought cheese sticks, probably not very healthy, but they had a chicken sandwich. I figured that has protein. And I'm like...
7.
Yeah.
He's 7.
And is that really profound? No, but is that unfortunately, is that more advanced than a lot of people would even go to think about it? Yeah, and those are the things.
He's putting more thought into it than some 35-year-olds.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is that when I was younger, there was never a day where you like sat us like all the kids down and said, "This is a protein. It's 4 calories per gram." Like that never happened. What happened is we just saw you doing it, and as we would do things that were either sports or when I did track and field, and I would say, "Hey, what would be like a good thing to eat before meet?" I remember actually you're like, I would personally do like a protein shake and a bowl of oatmeal, like get you some carbs in you, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, carbs because energy and repairing, glycogen, fat. Oh, it's just fat's good. You got healthy fats, and you have these are all things that." Really, bodybuilding is just breaking all those down to its simplest forms. The chicken is the protein, the rice is the carb, drizzle of olive oil, I have my fats. You do the same measurements for those same days. And
and actually everything, now that I think about it, can be defined as a minimum effective dose. Yeah. You find the minimum effective dose to gain and not spill over in diet. You find the minimum effective dose in training to stimulate growth but not overtrain. Yep. The minimum effective dose to get the adequate amount of sleep but not lay there all day, where you get diminishing returns. So every PEDs, you get the minimum effective dose to get the anabolic effect. And then, but if you cross the line, now you've jumped into side effects and you get diminishing returns. So it's not balance, it's the minimum effective dose for everything that we do. And that's what we're doing. So when you say, Justin Harris, again, he said something that I have said. He said he never tells his clients to trust the process. He tells them what the process is. Mm-hmm. And for me, if I ever say that, I'll say, trust the next 4 weeks, because over the next 4 weeks, we collect data. So trust what I'm giving you right now. And I want you to apply it over the next 4 to 6 weeks. And then we will take that data and then we will make adjustments. The problem is when you have a client that you give them specific instructions over the next 4 weeks and they don't do it. So now you don't have any real data to collect, or they lie to you, or they don't track, or they don't send check-in photos. Then what are you going to do?
No, I did everything. I just didn't eat the 500 grams of fruit and vegetables. And so I don't know if that's affecting anything. It's like, well, I mean, I figured you were. It is funny because that's one thing I think also you try to find every shortcut now. And I'm not saying these things are bad, like retatrutide. It's like that. A lot of people use that to a great advantage. But if you're already metabolically healthy, if you're already dropping body fat quickly, you have insulin sensitivity, everything is showing like you have adequate mitochondrial health, all these things that are like buzzwords now. Why would you change it? And why would you add these things in if you might just have to be hungry? Like,
that's my thing.
So I feel like, you have all these things in its simplest form. You're right. It's like minimum effective dose, just because even if you can get away with it, should you do it? Should you do all of these things when I was talking to Tyler, he said that during his contest prep, he never got like below 300 carbs. But some people, just because they're 3 weeks out, would drop you down to a certain amount because they're saying, well, that's just what you do. But if he was fine up until that point, or someone else is, that's a good example of like, why would you change that? For me, that's been very eye-opening this time around is, it's a big thing to constantly want to jump onto the newest trend, the newest thing. With bodybuilding, really, what's funny is, like you talked about, if you're doing it the way that you're doing it now, it's kind of how it's to an extent always been. Yeah. You don't even have to worry about changing that up, overcomplicating if you should even eat carbs or not. Well, most people are if they're bodybuilding. So, no, I think that most of the food stuff, most of the nutrition things, if my 7-year-old or if me when I was younger, I could absorb it. Most adults can. It comes into just if you want to and if you're committed or not. And I think that's where when you're having conversations with people, if you're the one that's making progress, especially if you're in a group of people, immediately it's got to be, well, are you sneaking here and training at night? You're not telling me, or are you taking it more stuff than me, or is it the creatine? Is that just what I have to do? And whenever you tell someone, I mean, honestly, man, like here's my meal plan. Here's like how much I train. Even when I was like fully natural, I was like, I don't know what else you want me to tell you. It hasn't felt easy for me. I feel like I'm in here every day trying really hard, and sometimes not going out and having drinks with friends because that's a social thing, or not eating this thing. If just because, my wife and kid, if they want to have taco night, they will be just fine having taco night. But if it doesn't align with me stepping on a stage, I can't do that.
I didn't eat the same meal with your mother and sister for 7 months.
Yep.
Oh, and talk about convenience. You know what kitchen I've been using for the past 7 months. I have a makeshift throw together kitchen in my shithole basement.
It's bad.
It's bad.
It's really bad.
And I did it. And the same as you, I have a break room. I do have a refrigerator, but I've got a plug-in hot plate and a microwave. I never meal prepped. I cooked. I did have the luxury of being able to run to the back. I know how to make a 10-minute meal. I would have chicken on the hot plate while I was training a client. They'd be taking a break. I'd run back, stir up the chicken, run back, do a set, run back, pop rice in the microwave, run back, and then put the meal. And then I'd be standing there out on the floor while somebody's doing a set of squats, shoveling down, my meal. And then at home, your sister and your mother would have this, even though it wasn't bad, it didn't align with me for my goal, but we would all still be having dinner together. Mm-hmm. Just eating. I've had clients tell me that their spouse or significant other or whatever gets angry with them if they're eating different food with them, even if they're collectively eating together at the same time, sharing time with one another. That's ridiculous. So that's why it's so important to have support at home.
Yeah, that's a big thing too, is, I was talking to my wife before all this, and I was just kind of like laying it out. And at this point, she's pretty much used to it. But you talk to people who, if they're not kind of raised around this, it just comes across as incredibly neurotic at times.
For sure.
Like,
we're crazy.
If we were at a fair about a month ago, and I was just beside myself because there was like, you couldn't bring outside food in. So immediately I'm like, worst nightmare. And it's a fair. So as you can imagine, even the places that had chicken, it's just, I see them with like vegetable oil in the back, just dunking in there. I'm just like, oh God. And so I had my little like crossbody bag, and I just shoved like 3 or 4 core powers in there, like the 40-gram protein. So I'm walking around, it's like 95 degrees outside, of course, chugging warm core powers to hit my protein. And I'm sure my wife and her parents at some point are like, why? You're health, like, and it's like, oh no, I actually found a chicken adobo stand where I asked the guy, he's like, no seed oil. I was like, chicken and rice. And so I had that. And you do realize, wow, I'm a little weird. This is strange. Like,
give them time. One thing I'll say about your mother, God bless her, is we went to the Apple Festival.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about North Carolina, it's just, very close to Asheville, North Carolina. And I was there with my crossbody bag, and I had little Ziploc bags of whey protein, and I had Ziploc bags packed with rice cakes because I knew it was going to be a shit show for food. But your mother's been in this game long enough to where she would say, it's 2:00. Don't you have to eat? And they would get, festival shit food. And she'd be obsessively trying to find me a cold water so I could get my shaker bottle, put my whey in, so she gets it. But she's been doing this with me for on and off for 30 years.
Yeah.
So thank God that she's so supportive and understands it. And, it's like when I do the shows, I mean, she turns into Mama Bear. She takes over. She gets the Airbnb. She directs traffic.
She does not take shit during those 3 days.
She does not take shit. We're going to do this, and we've got a schedule. And she keeps me on point. And, she's, putting on my tan at 5 a.m. and shaving my ass. And, so it's so important to have that support network. And, you know, your mother's thrilled that you're looking to compete. So when do you want to compete? Are we looking at next year?
I
don't want to take all these people valuable time. They're probably all asleep.
Yeah, but I wouldn't blame them. No, my plan was for fall of 2026 when they have those round of shows. You know, I know that maybe spring 2027 would have given me a little bit more time to put on size before I'll have to start leaning out. But if everything goes according to schedule, I feel like that'll give me time to at least do a show and get the practice in on a prep, so that the following year, if it's earlier in the year, I'd like to really try to push to win at least a local qualifier at some point in the next few years. And I think I could do it. I mean, you know, that's not to say that I think, you know, as someone who's not done it, that I'm better than all these people already have, but I just have a lot of competitive drive, and I already know.
And you have knowledge.
Yeah.
And you have discipline.
Yeah, I enjoy it.
You have a support network.
I would prefer to be eating and training and living this way versus not. So if I can compete and have all of these things just lead to something where I can have something to show for all my hard work, that's a bonus.
You could do the Mid-Atlantic in October.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long time.
I mean, that gives me plenty of time, and that's why, you know, in the group, I'm going to keep trying to post when I can here and there. I've not been very good about it. It's been kind of nice just kind of focusing on myself and where I want to be before I feel like I have to share it on Instagram all day and stuff. But I have tried in the group to be transparent about my progress and how quickly things are going and what my plans are. But yeah, fall of next year, that's what I'm gunning for. Mid-Atlantic would be great just because that's the one you won. But
it's a great promoter, great show.
Yeah, so. I got to meet him very briefly before the show, and he was incredibly kind and polite. Asked if I was going to be, which I was like, man, I am so pale, white, and small. I really hope not. But no, I'm very excited. I want to do more of these. Maybe it won't be as much of a shit show on my end because before we started, had no idea what
none of this is
about.
Scripted. We had no notes. We just turned on the camera.
But and if anyone has any questions in the group, I think one thing I can speak to my experience on is just being raised in an environment that is just associated with the fitness industry in almost every capacity in terms of lifestyle, and how to carry that, instill that into a family and steward that into your kids and even your spouse's lives. Because for me, that's what's been great too, is my wife has actually been waking up at 4 a.m. every day for the past month working out, because you go to one of those shows, it's very inspiring to see people of all ages to accomplish so much. So fall of next year, I'm going to keep trying to put on some size, and I'll keep very active in the group so that I can definitely take whatever nuggets of wisdom I can from anyone there, because we got a solid group of people in there.
Yeah, the group is the Hypertrophy Underground on Facebook. The link's below, so join the group. It's super supportive, non-dogmatic. We won't yell at you if you don't do everything exactly the way we do. And there are people there to help you with your pursuits and your goals. But man, we've went over an hour, so let's let these poor people go. But we'll do this again.
No, yeah, we'll do it again, and we'll maybe have a topic if anyone wants us to stay. So I don't jump different topics.
No, I think this was great. Yeah. I mean, this is just us, and this is what we do, and this is full transparency and completely unscripted. So there you go. For speaking for my son Tyler and myself, we appreciate you guys being here. If you'd be so gracious to honor us, or charity, whatever you want to call it, hit the subscribe button, the thumbs up, all the things. And until next time, we'll be back with another video very soon. So thank you guys. We are out.
Yep. Thank you.